Comenzamos la próxima presentación a cargo de Mike Solly. Mike ha trabajado en el campo de la enseñanza del idioma inglés durante casi 30 años, después de haber pasado 15 años como profesor de aula y luego gestionando proyectos y redes de enseñanza de inglés a pequeña y gran escala para el British Council. Ha vivido y trabajado en muchos países, principalmente en Medio Oriente, en Europa del Este, Bosnia, Herzegovina. Trabajó desde enero de 2009 en la Open University del Reino Unido y en la actualidad es quien coordina dentro del British Council a nivel global como un foco en el cual se concentra la información de todos los programas que tienen que ver con el programa de Lenguas para la Resiliencia. Él nos va a estar contando acerca de los programas que están haciéndose a nivel de la organización y cuál es el enfoque que tiene la organización a nivel global. Mike.
Thank you, Pablo. Just get my little timing device going. Buenos dias. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We got the slides going. I'm a little bit technology anxious today. Okay. Yay. Okay. So first of all, I'm so pleased to have been invited to Argentina for the first time. When I was a child, my uncle, who himself was a refugee from Germany, and had barely ever left England after that, and by the way, he happens to turn 100 in 3 months' time, used to enjoy entering into debates with me, his somewhat agnostic nephew, about his various superstitions and beliefs. I would often say to him things like, "But how can you believe in ghosts and spirits when you haven't seen them, Uncle David?" He would invariably reply, "Well, I have never been to Argentina, but I'm prepared to believe that it exists." So I will now be able to return and tell my Uncle David, before he hits 100, that he was completely right to believe in Argentina, and I'm very glad to say it does indeed exist. So my name is Mike Solly. I've worked in English language teaching and education for around 30 years. Some, as Pablo mentioned, in areas of conflict, including the Middle East and Bosnia, while working for the British Council. I also spent some years as an academic at the Open University working in South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa, where I developed research interests in language needs and migration. I'm now back at the British Council, where I work as a senior advisor on English for education systems with a global responsibility for this new developing area of language for resilience. What I'd like to discuss today is, first of all, a little background. What do we mean by resilience? How does the British Council interpret resilience? And what part does language play in that? And why the British Council? Mark mentioned at the beginning of the day the kind of work we've done, but I'd like to explore a bit more what we may be able to bring to it and why it interests us. I'll also look at the initial research we commissioned. I'd like to point out as well, this is just an overview. There will be opportunities to go into more detail about the research from one of the researchers who is here, Dr. Tony Capstick from the University of Reading. And I will also talk a little about programs that we are running in different countries. Again, just quite high level, and we have other people to talk in more detail. By that stage, you will probably have heard enough of my voice, and I'm going to show a short video, technology depending, which shows some of the work we've done. And then, if I can, I hope to take you to an exhibition in London. More on that soon. But how to set the scene for such a serious and generally grim global phenomenon? Well, to do this, I'd like to begin with some lines from a poem by the British poet born to Somali parents in Kenya, Warsan Shire. No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. You only run for the border when you see the whole city running as well. You have to understand that no one puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than the land. I want to go home, but home is the mouth of a shark. Home is the barrel of the gun, and no one would leave home unless home chased you to the shore, unless home told you to quicken your legs, leave your clothes behind. Language for resilience is about helping people to keep what they haven't left behind, their agency, their voice. I'm always very wary of statistics because, as again Mark said at the beginning of the day, as soon as you say them, they're out of date. And also they come from a range of different sources. But in terms of migration generally, according to the United Nations International Migration Report of 2017, there are around 260 million international migrants worldwide, or there were. This number is rapidly increasing, with just under half of these being women and girls. In terms of forcibly displaced migration, the UNHCR estimates that there are nearly 60 million displaced refugees from across the globe, of which 3.5 million live in temporary transit camps, like the one you see. The number of refugees and internally displaced people has trebled, more than trebled now, in the last 30 years, and nearly 75% of them are hosted by neighbouring countries, most of which struggle with limited resources to manage their own development. Meanwhile, the World Bank suggests that another 1.5 billion people live in areas affected by fragility, conflict, or large-scale organised criminal violence, conditions which, of course, can fuel a further migrant exodus. Of course, the particularly large numbers of displaced refugees in often very small countries in the Middle East has massively intensified since the start of the Syrian war. It is this long and cruel conflict that has been a catalyst for the developing notion of language for resilience, with the gathering of research about language needs in 2015-16, and the subsequent expansion of projects and programs in other areas, including, of course, as we heard earlier, in the Americas. But what exactly do we mean by resilience? And how is this word, for some years ubiquitous in the positive narratives from humanitarian organisations, interpreted in the British Council's programmes in language for resilience? Anne Marston, the American psychologist and scholar, has written a lot on trauma, and she stresses the connection between resilience and positive responses to adversity. The UNDP stresses the core of their understanding of resilience is of enabling systemic change within nations to transform immediate humanitarian relief into long-term developmental support programs. Both these interpretations are relevant to the British Council's underlying goals in programs we run. But we have taken the words from the United Nations Regional Refugee Resilience Plan of 2015-16 to underscore what we do in our programs. And that is the ability of individuals, households, communities, and institutions to anticipate, withstand, recover, and transform from shocks and crises. Resilience is generally seen to operate at three different but interconnected levels: the individual level, the community level, and the institutional level. There is, of course, something of a chain reaction in these three levels, with any one of them helping to strengthen the other two. So, what are the different aspects or components of resilience? What do you need to be resilient? Or what can help build individual resilience? As I'm an English teacher, I was tempted to involve you a bit in this part, but I'll let you off, I think. So, things that, of course, there are many components, and I'm sure you can think of others. I'd just like you to think of some while I put up a few that a number of us thought of. They're not everything, of course. So a sense of hope, somehow involving social competence and interaction with different groups. Meaningful engagement and purpose. And I think the stress there is on the meaningful. A sense of belonging to a community. I think actually we could say to communities. And a very essential thing that the research that we will look at later has picked up on is having a voice, a sense of achievement, just as people would want when they're in their home communities. So regional refugee resilience plan, the regional refugee resilience plan sees language as crucial because it gives vulnerable people and communities a voice for access. It acts as a protective factor in adding to resourcefulness in times of adversity. And it can promote social cohesion and intercultural understanding by encouraging communication. So the acquisition or even successful retention of language, by that I mean keeping the language from home, can build resilience. Language is a key factor in the education of mobile populations and refugees and can offer protection or it can enhance vulnerability. It is therefore both an enabler and or a barrier to resilience. Language can be a positive enabler by being the means to enhance cultural understanding and social cohesion, as well as helping to provide a sense of identity and helping people remember and know who they are. The possession of appropriate languages enables people to express what they need and what they feel, and it can help them to succeed and thrive educationally. It can also enable access to the job market, which helps strengthen host communities as well, and providing readiness for rebuilding home economies when refugees return. However, a lack of appropriate languages excludes people from the areas just mentioned, and the sense of marginalization can result in community conflict, both within migrant communities and between the host and migrant communities. Lack of appropriate languages can also cause a generally undesired dependence on others and on host structures, resulting in refugees having things done to them, or in the long term, depriving them of individual agency. I think the former British Council Director to Syria, Joe Bubbers, who actually visited Argentina some time ago, expressed really well what language for resilience really is on the individual level. What does it mean to people? When he said, and I will unusually read this one because I think some of you might have difficulty with it. Language for resilience is about giving people the resources they need to have the agency and belief that they can take the lead in addressing the problems in their lives. Take the lead. That's where language and literacy comes in. It could be the child in Lebanon who dropped out of school because she didn't speak the language of the classroom. It could be the teacher struggling to manage and motivate students who all have different mother tongues. It could be the young person who dreamed of becoming a doctor but lost proof of their education on the journey from Syria, and now they need to start again with an online language course in order to access university. It could be the activist who wants to make change in their community but can't express it in the way they want to local or international stakeholders. Or it could be the mother who doesn't have the language skills to help her children catch up after school, or to explain to the doctors what's wrong. In all these countries, English language is in high demand, often as a gatekeeper to education and livelihoods. I'm going to give our excellent translators a quick breather while I grab some water. So, why is this area of interest to the British Council, and what can the British Council bring to it? The British Council then aims for a safer, more inclusive and more prosperous world. We do this through programmes that connect people internationally and which we hope contribute to increased intercultural understanding and mutual respect between peoples. The British Council has a very long history, as Mark indicated earlier, of continuing to operate in countries where there's been conflict and also attempting to work with agencies and governments to reduce tension and conflict. We've delivered courses and arts projects to mixed groups across the fracture lines that were recently so strong in, for example, Sri Lanka. Mark mentioned in this region, Venezuela and Colombia. I personally was lucky enough to work on programs for many years in Bosnia and Herzegovina, immediately before, during, and after the brutal civil war. Working on language programs that help bridge communities that had so recently been at war with each other. The British Council continues to run programs in Iran, despite tensions and international soured political relations. We operate in all the countries of the Middle East where the Arab Spring took place, including Libya. And we have had a 17-year English language project based at a university in North Korea that Mark mentioned again. We have worked with international peacekeeping forces in language across the globe and have been quick to respond to the developing crisis with refugees and migrants. But all of this work is in partnership with a range of stakeholders, particularly governments, of course, and ministries of education, as well as other UK and international organisations. A particular area where we've had a long history is in the Middle East. In Syria, and in all of Syria's neighbouring countries. The current crisis in Syria and the huge influx of refugees to neighbouring countries, which have taken in many times the number of refugees from the crisis than the rest of the world, has made us all examine how we can help both the refugee communities and the countries that host them. In the case of refugees, this is through attempting to diminish their sense of vulnerability and to increase the protective factors that can build their resilience. The British Council is seen as being in a good position to act as a conduit to bring partners and experts to work together in devising research and creating activities that can help promote language for resilience. This expertise may be held in a variety of different UK, regional, or global organisations. In terms of language and teacher training, the British Council also has a great deal of in-house experience and expertise. The research and programmes created, of which more in a moment, will, we hope, stimulate debate, leading to further research to benefit both refugees and migrants and the host communities that are supporting them. The key focus is to identify the needs, current good practice, potential gaps in programming, and to consider the ways that the British Council and its partners can further develop language education programmes to develop capacity during times of prolonged crisis, wherever that may occur in the world. So I think some of you may have a copy or a summary of this initial research already, but as a first step in helping to promote an understanding of the language needs of refugees and host communities from the Syria crisis, and in the countries that surround Syria. In 2016, the British Council commissioned a research project which resulted in the publication of Language for Resilience, the role of language in enhancing the resilience of Syrian refugees and host communities. 2 experienced researchers were selected to conduct the research. Dr. Tony Capstick from the University of Reading. Where are you, Tony? Just so that people know. Right in the middle, just so you know who to talk to, and Mary Delaney, an educational psychotherapist and author of Teaching the Unteachable, conducted the research. The research explored the impact of language on refugees and host communities affected by the Syrian crisis in Jordan, the Kurdistan region of Iraq, Lebanon, and Turkey, identifying the different ways that language skills enhance resilience and providing suggestions for programme responses that address key needs. It has a specific focus on what was unique, What was the cross-sector approach and the range of voices, projects, and views? And I know that Tony will be talking in a lot more detail about what was actually said and that range of voices. Participants included IDPs, NGOs, formal and informal education providers, donors, and participants in the arts sector. All of this was strongly linked in with the United Nations Regional Refugee Resilience Plan. Quite apart from not having the language necessary to operate in, refugees and migrants, as well as this literal lack of voice, also have few opportunities to express themselves about the situations they find themselves in, to those that can potentially influence or advocate for them. Similarly, members of the host community are often deprived of this non-language-based voice to express their concerns about potential effects on the schooling of their children, etc., with the amalgamation in some contexts of large numbers of refugees who don't speak local languages. During the country visits, the researchers interviewed refugees, internally displaced persons, host community members in community settings, and a range of others, and they talked to their parents, teachers, and local NGO staff, as well as to Ministry of Education officials. The findings are a synthesis of what the researchers were told during these interviews and the classroom observations carried out, combined with a review of the resilience literature. They found that there is an existing literature within the field of psychology which deals with resilience, and it is through this literature that a link was made to what we know about language and language learning programs that will benefit refugees. Well, here's just a few of the voices of the recipients of some of the programs. I think the first one there is interesting because I think we can all fall into the idea, into the notion of seeing refugees as refugees and not necessarily as rounded, full human beings. It's obvious, I know, but that was something that definitely came back in the research. The linguistic landscape is inevitably very varied in the different countries hosting refugees. In the African context, there can be hundreds of languages spoken in a particular host location, and a range of languages, to say nothing of dialects, from African refugees themselves. Even if we take just those countries that surround Syria, we find enormous variation. Refugees to Turkey generally have no knowledge at all of the overwhelmingly predominant language, a situation that I imagine is similar here in Argentina for refugees from the Arab world. And Turkish is what is needed for school and higher education. The disruption to literacy, even in their own language for many young refugees, means that even in Jordan and Lebanon, where Arabic is the dominant language, there may be literary obstacles to entering the formal education system. In higher education, there is a need for English in all of these countries, and in Lebanon, as well as Arabic, secondary-age school children need to have a knowledge of English or French to fully engage with the curriculum. And in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, home to many Syrian refugees, a knowledge of one or more varieties of Kurdish is necessary to participate in the education system. So the research was carried out by our two researchers with a series of country visits, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey, over a few months. And they examined both the commonalities and differences in responses from stakeholders. And they came up with 5 key themes that can be used for program responses. And it's these 5 themes that underpin our responses. Tony will talk in his session about the detail of this. But broadly speaking, the 5 themes are home language and literacy development. So creating the foundations for shared identity, belonging, and future study through home language use. Access to education, training, and employment. So language competence provides access to and engagement in the world of education, training, and employment. Learning together and social cohesion, language learning activities as a basis for developing individual resilience and ensuring dignity, self-sufficiency, and life skills. Addressing the effects of trauma on learning, so language programs as a supportive intervention and a way to address, or perhaps to start to address, the effects of loss, displacement, and trauma on behavior and learning. And finally, building the capacity of teachers and strengthening education systems to create inclusive classrooms. So professional training for language teachers to build institutional resilience, for example. Okay, as we're a little behind time, I'm actually just going to skip forward slightly. Now I need to refine my place, bear with me. So I also wanted to mention an event that took place a couple of months ago in Salzburg, Austria, that relates to language for resilience, and particularly to the first of the themes around home languages and the notion of multilingualism. This brought together a number of leading international academics and practitioners in the field, and they produced a statement of intent, the Salzburg Statement for a Multilingual World. The preamble to the statement lists some interesting facts about language. All of them in themselves interesting, but I'd like to draw your attention to two of them in particular. 40% of people have no access to education in a language they understand. The implications of that are incredible. And I think probably, Peter, my colleague who works in Ethiopia, would be able to say a lot more about this, but I think the figure is far higher than 40% in sub-Saharan Africa. 244 million people, risen of course, are international migrants, of whom 20 million are refugees, a 41% increase since 2000. Migrants and refugees alone would constitute the 5th most populous country in the world. So the statement itself says, we urge individuals, corporations, institutions, and governments to adopt a multilingual mindset that celebrates and promotes language diversity as the global norm, tackles language discrimination, and develops language policies that advance multilingualism. And a part of the call to action asks that we recognize that ministries, migrants, and refugees possess high linguistic capital that is of great value for our present and future world. An incredibly important sort of optimistic message there. Okay, now I am, in a few minutes, going to give a brief overview of some of the projects that the British Council and its partners are currently running in the area of language for resilience. However, first, after hearing me speak for this long, I thought it was time to hear some other voices, and those from people working with Syrian refugees directly in the Middle East. Almost exactly 2 years ago, the British Council instigated an ELT conference, an English language teaching conference, at the Zaatari refugee camp in Jordan. A number of us here attended this groundbreaking event. I thought it might be interesting to hear some voices gathered around this event. So, not sure if this is going to work, but if it does, this will last about 5 minutes. Okay, it didn't. So I go to plan B. I always have a plan B up my sleeve. Right, I find when I do things like this, you mustn't watch me, okay? Because then it won't work. Yeah, exactly.
I think the future will depend on us. The first thing in every nation is the education.
English is very important for our generations, especially in the camp.
These children, at one stage or another, they're going to go back to a normal life. We don't want them to wake up and realize that they have lost years of education.
Syria is a humanitarian tragedy, and responding to it is a UK priority. We're working with a whole range of international partners to support Syrians both inside and outside the country.
Since the crisis started, the British Council has been responding to the needs of Syrian refugees in a number of ways, but particularly around English language and access to quality language education, because that's one of our core purposes that we deliver around the world.
Resilience is fundamental. By teaching Syrian refugee children English and French as a foreign language, we're providing them with the tool that they can access education. If they don't have this, they won't be able to go to school, they won't be able to get any exams, any qualifications, and they will become a lost generation.
Language is a key part of the process of young people getting themselves the future that is right for them. To engage in higher education, it gives them the skills that they need to get work.
The English language impact in Iraq has grown in the IDPs and refugees community. The English language is very important for them to study, to communicate, and to have better future.
The language differences in Turkey are different to here because no one in Turkey really speaks Arabic. To go to school, most of the kids need Turkish. For university, English is a big bonus, and hopefully when they go home to Syria to help rebuild, they'll need Arabic again.
I noticed the difference between the students in the first year and now. More of them had a scholarship by UNHCR or some other organization outside. So they can go to a university to study engineering or medicine or something like Arabic language. They need to be good in English to involve in university.
أخذت أنا دورات إنجليزي بريليفون. أنا قويت حالي ويعني بفضل التقوى قدرت إني يعني أتوظف بيها بالمدرسة الأمريكية واللغة كمان ساعدتني بالجامعة.
The conference in the camp is aimed at Syrian teachers of English. We're helping them to improve their teaching skills so that they can pass on their knowledge to children learning here in the camp.
When we heard about this opportunity to organize a 3-month training first, which would raise capacities of English teachers inside Zaatari camp, we were so happy to participate in this initiative and to partner with the British Council.
If I'm going to class, I'll be a totally different teachers with new experiences, with new methodologies to practice in the class.
So we're focused on capacity building as well as teacher training content. So by capacity building, I mean that we are working to train national trainers, and they are responsible in Lebanon, because they work for the Ministry of Education, they are responsible for teaching all public school teachers in Lebanon.
The impact was great because if I trained 12 teachers, each of them would teach about 50, 60 students. So if you think of the numbers that we reached quite a large number of students.
Le contenu des formations était d'un niveau supérieur, très bien fait, très bien préparé. Et la réaction des enseignants était très positive.
The training was very helpful for the children and very useful. And I think if we do more and more, we can help the children more.
One of the things we've been doing is we've been looking at what's the definition of resilience, how I actually develop myself to have meaningful engagement, to have social interaction, to have some personal dignity, and I suppose to have my voice heard.
We don't have right to say to people, we are giving you dignity. We are here to give them tool, to give them space, and to give them time to get on
and find their resilience with languages. And then they can move without us and they won't need us anymore.
فكرة ممتازة لأنه نحن هلأ ما رح نعرف إمتى رح نرجع لسوريا، ما رح نعرف هون شو ممكن نتعرض، ما رح نعرف المستقبل لقدام شو هو، وين رح نعيش، وين رح نصير. ففكرة إنه الواحد يتعلم لغات أكثر من لغة أنا بالنسبة لي ممتازة.
We have to be thinking about the hope that we are giving to Syrian children and Syrian families, and language and access to education is an essential means of doing that. They want to be back home and they want to have the opportunity and the skills to be able to rebuild their country. And we have a moral obligation to help with that.
I realised there that I was giving a very advanced, even more advanced job to our simultaneous translators, as 2 more languages were introduced for them to deal with. Sorry about that. They'll be glad to see the back of me. So I wanted to give a brief overview of some, but by no means all, of the projects we are now operating. Of course, most of these are currently in the Middle East, but the refugee crisis is no less acute in sub-Saharan Africa. And as highlighted at the beginning of this talk, it's also severe in the Americas. As I was working out the best way to go through these projects, the fairest, I thought I'd just do it alphabetically. And what do you know? So one of the newer projects in Language for Resilience is here in Argentina, where a pilot in remote training in the Spanish language has been taking place for Syrian refugees across the country. Of course, we heard earlier today, this is no longer a pilot. It's moved beyond that stage. The next phase that begins with this event is to build a community and network of partners working in the area of Language for Resilience. And this, we hope, is to be followed by the planned development of immersion approaches to skills for employability, or Spanish for academic purposes orientated courses that help build refugees' resilience and confidence when acquiring host community languages. After looking at one of our newer Language for Resilience programs, this one, the LASER project, is operated from Jordan. My colleague Claire Dewey will be able to say a lot more about that. This EU-funded program provides access to language and academic classes for more than 3,000 Syrians and disadvantaged Jordanian students. And I'd like to stress that as well. It's also for disadvantaged or marginalized students within the host community in both Jordan and Lebanon, in camps and in urban areas. Around 60 teachers have also graduated from teacher training courses held inside the Zatari camp that you saw on the film there and the Azraq refugee camps. Additionally, 350 youths from these courses will either start or continue with their higher education studies through the Open University UK or Amity University, securing credits, certificates, diplomas and degrees to either complete or continue their higher education studies while they reside in Jordan or Lebanon. At least 400 students have also had the opportunity to continue their studies online in English or Arabic. This program, the Accessing Education program, now completed, helps Syrian refugee school-age children to integrate into host communities in Lebanon. The program designed a series of training activities and educational materials for English and French teachers, as well as producing teacher and teacher training workshops on language teaching methodology and sociolinguistic approaches. In addition to this, the program built government mentors' capacity, providing training and follow-up coaching for mentors supporting English and French teachers in classrooms. The program reached 1,500 Lebanese state schools, more or less, state school teachers, and 90,000 school students. Extensive qualitative and quantitative data collected in long-term research plans showed greater confidence and resilience in issues of inclusion, tolerance, and anti-discrimination. This project, the HOPES project, operates across the Middle East in 5 countries and provides scholarships and academic counselling for Syrian and local students. The British Council provides 100-hour face-to-face English access programs through partner universities with a 40-hour blended online component and entry and exit tests. These are delivered by the university's teaching staff, who themselves receive training and support from the British Council. And next we move to Iraq, and this program consists of an informal 10-day language training program in the NGO contexts, which strengthens the quality of English language teaching within the Mercy Corps program in Iraq, developing the skills and competencies of the Mercy Corps coaches in communicative, participatory, and interactive language teaching. We have also been working with some of the many refugees who are currently in camps in Greece. Perhaps the image that was in the poem at the beginning from Shire about nobody puts their children on a boat. Those images have probably burned into many of our minds. And the lucky ones, some of the lucky ones, end up in camps in Greece. A British Council team of teachers, trainers, and child protection experts leads a daily program of English language and life skills classes for students aged 2 to 17 from Afghan, Kurdish, Syrian, and Yazidi backgrounds, mainly, other backgrounds too. Through this school readiness project, students learn to cooperate in multicultural, mixed-gender classes while developing a set of essential skills. In parallel, the Living Together trainings offer capacity building to a wider audience of teachers and trainers on trauma-informed practices and on fostering inclusion in their classrooms. Moving to Sub-Saharan Africa, a region that has a huge unmet demand for language for resilience type programs. We are working with partners, including UNHCR, in a number of the refugee camps along the Sudanese and South Sudanese border with Ethiopia. The program, still relatively small and in its infancy, is building a sustainable cadre of teacher educators drawn from both refugees and Ethiopian nationals, teaching in schools who can support continuing professional development and ensure high-quality learning experiences for pupils in participating schools. And the final project I'd like to mention is moving back to the Middle East and a pilot program that is running in Syria itself. The objective of the online English course for teachers inside Syria are to build young Syrians' resilience through accessing new sources of information, skills for education and employment via professional development and online mentoring of teachers inside Syria. Currently, this is quite a small-scale project, but the impact is being carefully monitored to see if this has potential for being significantly scaled up. Almost finally, I just wanted to mention an exhibition, I mentioned it at the beginning, that officially opens on Monday at the British Council headquarters in central London on Language for Resilience, and which runs until June, actually until International Migrants' Day. You are, of course, all invited to visit if you happen to be in London. But I suspect many of you will not be there and are therefore thinking, yeah, well, this all seems a bit remote. Well, at the risk of inducing even more technology anxiety, I am going to attempt, this is about 50-50 whether this will work, I'm going to attempt to give you a quick virtual tour. Again, this may not work, and being a control freak, this is probably the most stupid thing I could do, but here we go. Cursor, good. This might work. Just got to see if I can do it. So here we are. For those of you who have been there, this is Trafalgar Square, or just off Trafalgar Square at the British Council headquarters. And this is just outside our main building. I'm going to walk around here a bit. As you can see, this is it's all a bit new to me as well, but here we go. And we can see there are a number of posters that just indicate what language for resilience can do for people. And they're pretty fundamental human things, really. Making plans, getting qualifications, feeling good about yourself. Anyway, it's cold out here. So, I was a bit disorientated there. So let's go inside. You're all waiting for something to go really wrong, I know. But so here we are inside the building, and we can see that the exhibition looks at some of the initial issues and also gives a few facts and figures about language for resilience and about the refugee situation. I'm going to squeeze down here. What's around here? Okay, and so we've got various numbers and various quotes and thoughts about language for resilience. And at the wall at the end, it's showing all of the places, including, of course, Argentina, where this project operates. Let's move down here. Here, I've got stuck. Oh, yes. You can see there are various video screens that we pass en route. This one you will recognize with the video that we've just seen. These are playing through a loop, but it's not just this video. There are a number of videos from different contexts. As we move forward, okay, what do we got over here? A load of mobile phones. One of the things we found in all the countries we work in is the mobile phone is an absolutely essential tool for refugees and migrants. They may not have anything else, but they'll have their mobile phone in general. That's the thing they hang on to. And you can understand why. Again, it's about language and connection. Okay, and I'll just move to this last section if I can get there. I'm so pleased that this has worked. But anyway, here we go. We have a number of refugees themselves and quotes from refugees, etc. At the end, we have a little sort of carpeted area, which looks perhaps like the inside of some of the homes that people will have come from. And I'll just show you one last thing if I can. You can see that we also have a number of posters where, well, it's impossible to read unless you're wearing 3D glasses, and then suddenly the message becomes clear. And if I was more patient, I would be able to hook up the 3D glasses and show you what it says. But you just have to believe me that it makes sense. Okay, and finally, I started with a poem, and I'd like to end with one. A very short one. The need for words and being able to express ourselves has been, in my view, wonderfully and poetically expressed by that great poet of Latin America, Pablo Neruda. The poem, as you can see, is in the original Spanish, and I won't make you suffer with me attempting to read it in the original. So if it's not too jarring, please allow me to read in translation, which, while no doubt is inferior to the original, it still speaks volumes to me about our struggle and our human need to have voice. I'm going to wrinkle this word. I'm going to twist it. Yes, it's much too flat. It is as if a great dog or great river had passed its tongue or water over it during many years. I want that in the word the roughness is seen, the iron salt, the defanged strength of the land, the blood of those who have spoken, and those who have not spoken. I want to see the thirst inside the syllables. I want to touch the fire in the sound. I want to feel the darkness of the cry. I want words as rough as virgin rocks. I think I'll let Pablo have the last word. So thank you very much. And for more information, here are my details here. Thank you.